The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It pelted the city of Portland in a cold, relentless rhythm, beating against the hospital windows and drowning the streets in pools of reflection. At the St. Mercy Medical Center, the night shift moved in a blur of quiet footsteps and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Most of the world was asleep. But inside the hospital's emergency bay, chaos was minutes away. Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Her knuckles were white, her breath shallow. She had tried to call ahead, but her phone had died somewhere between her front door and the driver's seat. Now she was alone, 6 months pregnant, and bleeding. Badly. The pain had started 2 hours earlier, sharp, low, a tug in her abdomen. At first, she thought it was just stress. She had been on bed rest for weeks. But this wasn't a cramp. This was something else.
Something far more dangereux.
As she pulled into the hospital parking lot, another wave of pain sliced through her lower belly. She screamed.
Her vision blurred. The world tilted.
She barely managed to open the car door before collapsing onto the asphalt. Blood spilled beneath her like dark ink, soaking into the rain-drenched pavement. "Help," she cried out.
"Somebody, please."
Her voice was swallowed by thunder. Inside, Nurse Jamie Lynn was just finishing her coffee when the emergency call came in through the intercom.
Code red.
Female.
Third trimestre. Severe bleeding. Parking lot.
Jamie bolted from her seat, grabbing gloves and an emergency kit. Within seconds, she and 2 security officers were sprinting across the wet pavement. What they found made her heart stop. Emily lay curled on her side, trembling, her maternity dress clinging to her soaked body, blood mixing with rainwater in terrifying volume.
Jamie knelt besider. Ma'am, can you hear me? What is your name?
Emily blinked, trying to focus. Her lips were cracked, trembling. Emily.
Carter, 24 weeks, it's happening again.
Jamie's pulse spiked. She recognized the name.
Emily Carter.
The patient with a ruptured uterus history. 2 miscarriages. High-risk flag. Not supposed to be pregnant again.
Get the gurney, now. Jamie barked.
They lifted Emily onto the stretcher as carefully as they could. She cried out in pain, one hand wrapped protectively around her belly. Inside the ER, the lights buzzed harshly overhead as Dr. Naomi Singh entered, tying her surgical mask tight. "Vitals," she demanded. "BP is 70/40. Dropping fast," Jamie replied.
Naomi's eyes locked onto Emily's face.
"History." Jamie rattled it off.
Placenta previa.
Prior uterine rupture. 2 fetal losses. She was advised against future pregnancies. Naomi's jaw clenched. "How far along?"
24 weeks.
"She says the baby's name is Micah."
Emily groaned à another contraction hit.
Her eyes fluttered open. "They told me. I couldn't carry. But I felt him. He kicks. He's real." "You did everything you could," Naomi said softly. "Now let us do the rest." "Call OB," she snapped. "We're going into emergency C-section."
Doctor.
David Miller appeared at the doorway, pulling on gloves, eyes narrowed. "You're not seriously thinking of extracting at 24 weeks with a torn uterus?" Naomi didn't flinch.
"She's bleeding out."
"There's no time to stabilize." "You'll lose them both," he warned. "Then I'll lose them trying," she shot back. Emily's breathing became ragged. She reached for Naomi's wrist. "Please," she whispered. "Save him." Naomi nodded once, tightly.
We'll do everything.
They rushed Emily into O2, monitors already screaming. Her blood pressure continued to drop. The anesthesiologist worked fast. Naomi prepped for incision. David stood across the table, arms folded, jaw tense.
Scalpel.
The first cut released a rush of blood. Naomi moved quickly, layer by layer, eyes sharp, fingers steady. "Where's the uterine wall?" she asked. "Still intact."
No visible rupture at the incision point. D'était impossible, David muttered.
"She's hemorrhaging. The uterus must be torn."
Naomi scanned again.
"Nothing. No fetal heartbeat," Jamie reported. Her voice was tight. Naomi froze. "No," she said.
Look again. We've got nothing. No movement.
No signal. She leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed. Then, something. A flicker. A twitch.
There, she whispered.
David squinted. That's not a heartbeat. Probably a uterine spasm. It moved, Naomi insisted. She felt the membrane. A subtle quiver.
A strange softness along the side.
Jamie gasped. Doctor. Over here.
Air something, à terre.
Naomi followed her gaze.
A line, barely visible. Like a pencil scratch across the uterine sidewall. A spontaneous micro-rupture.
Forceps, Naomi said. You can't be serious, David said. That's no exit point. A fetus couldn't survive that tear. Then explain why I'm pulling one out right now. She slid the forceps in carefully, navigating the delicate gap. A moment later, a tiny glistening form emerged, so small, so translucent it looked almost imagined.
Jamie's beseeched.
He's the size of my hand. Naomi cupped the tiny body in both palms, her movements impossibly gentle. No cry, David noted. No breath. He's not viable. Don't say that, Naomi said, voice low. Not yet. She brought the infant close, cleared the airway with microsuction, tapped his chest once, twice. Nothing. Then, a sound. So faint it could have been the wind. A tiny gasp. Jamie's eyes filled with tears. He breathed. Emily stirred on the table, still unconscious. What was that? She mumbled.
Naomi leaned close.
Your son, she whispered. He's alive. David looked stunned. He shouldn't be. Naomi didn't look away from the baby in her hands. But he is. The rain outside continued to fall. But inside that room, for a brief, impossible moment, time stood still. The operating room felt unnaturally quiet, like the breathless pause between lightning and thunder. Naomi stood motionless for a beat, the tiny newborn still cradled in her gloved hands. His chest moved, barely, but it moved. That was enough. Jamie, she said, her voice steady but taut. We need the NICU team here. Now. Jamie turned and bolted from the room, calling into her radio. David stayed by the surgical table, staring at the infant as though trying to compute what he was seeing. This makes no sense, he muttered. You didn't fully open the uterus. There was no proper extraction route. Naomi didn't answer. She was too busy clearing the last of the infant's airways, using microsuction and whispering instructions to herself under her breath.
Come on, Mika. Stay with me.
The baby's skin was nearly translucent. His limbs trembled with every minor adjustment. Every second felt fragile.
The surgical lights cast a stark shadow across the room, sharpening every breath, every heartbeat, every unspoken question.
David finally stepped forward. Let me see that tear. Naomi didn't object. She nodded toward the uterine wall. He leaned in. The rupture was there, no longer than an inch jagged, but incredibly thin. Like a spontaneous fissure. Not the result of surgical incision, not traumatic enough to have torn the fetus apart. It's anatomically improbable, he said. A fetus that size shouldn't be able to pass through without fatal trauma. Yet he did, Naomi said quietly.
David glanced at her.
Do you have any idea how this will look in a report? Naomi turned to face him, still holding Micah in her hands, keeping him warm against the thermal pad Jamie had just brought back in. Do you have any idea what it felt like to hold a life everyone else gave up on?
David's face hardened.
I'm not against saving lives, Naomi. But this crossed a line. We went in to stabilize the mother. You risk them both for a premature fetus who statistically shouldn't be alive. Naomi snapped her gloves off one by one. And yet he is.
Not because of protocol.
Because we made a choice, to act. You gambled with her life. I stood with it, she corrected. Before David could respond, Emily stirred on the table. Her breathing had stabilized. Her eyelids fluttered open, unfocused, then wide with panic. Micah, she gasped. Where is he? Naomi rushed to her side, placing one hand on Emily's shoulder, the other still supporting the baby. He's here. He made it. Emily looked down and saw the tiny figure in Naomi's hands, wrapped in a warming blanket, a ventilation mask now gently placed over his mouth and nose. He's so small, she whispered. He's fighting, Naomi said. But he's alive.
Tears pooled in Emilia's eyes.
Her lips trembled, and for a moment she couldn't speak. I thought I lost him, she finally whispered. You didn't, Naomi said. You held on. Outside the OR, the NICU team arrived with a specialized incubator. Naomi gently handed Micah over to them, giving rapid instructions. He needs constant thermal regulation.
Watch for respiratory distress.
Prepare for caffeine therapy to stimulate breathing. As the team wheeled Micah out, Naomi stayed behind, watching him vanish through the double doors.
David broke the silence.
This isn't over. I know, Naomi said without looking at him. But he's not over either. They began the process of suturing Emily's uterus. Naomi worked in silence, layer by careful layer. There was a reverence to her movement, like she wasn't just repairing tissue, but honoring a battlefield. A battlefield that had somehow not claimed its victims. Later, in the recovery room, Emily lay under warm blankets, weak but conscious. The rain still tapped on the window beside her. Jamie stood by her bedside, checking the monitors. You'll need rest, Jamie said softly. Emily turned her head. Her voice was hoarse. Did you see him? When he came out? Jamie nodded, smiling faintly. I've never seen anything like it. He was glowing.
Like something out of a storybook.
Emily closed her eyes. Everyone told me I was broken. That no baby would survive inside me. But he did. Jamie adjusted her foreline. Some people survive because of science. Others survive because someone refused to stop believing. In the hallway outside, Naomi leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, exhaustion written across her face. David approached slowly. The board will want answers, he said. This kind of delivery, it's unprecedented. No literature supports it. I'm aware.
You'll be under review.
Possibly suspended. Naomi didn't react. Then they can suspend me. But that baby was breathing in my hands. I won't apologize for not standing still. David watched her for a long moment. I didn't think he'd live, he admitted. You made me feel something I hadn't felt in years.
What is that?
Hope. And fear. Naomi almost smiled. They usually come together. Back in the NICU, Micah was stabilized under controlled light, his tiny body connected to a dozen monitors. The beeping of machines formed a rhythm, irregular but present. Life measured in millimeters and seconds. Jamie stood beside him, logging vitals. She turned when Naomi entered. Vitals are steady, Jamie said. But weak. We're going to have to watch him every second.
Naomi stepped forward.
She placed 2 fingers gently on the incubator, as if anchoring herself to it. We will. Jamie hesitated. You think he can make it? Naomi didn't blink. I think he already has. In that sterile room, surrounded by glass and chrome and science, there was a pulse of something else. Something unmeasurable.
Something défiant.
Micah Carter had slipped through an impossible wound, drawn his first breath against the weight of a world that never expected him to exist. And now, he was here. Not because the textbooks said he could be, but because someone refused to let him go. The neonatal intensive care unit at St. Mercy Medical Center didn't sleep. Even when the rest of the hospital quieted down, the NICU pulsed with low beeping monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the subtle hum of life holding on by a thread. Room 7, at the far end of the hallway, had been prepared for emergencies. But no one had ever used it for a baby like Micah Carter. Jamie stood over the incubator, her clipboard in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. Respiration fluctuating, she said to Naomi, who had just entered after briefing the attending physician. He's holding at 32 breaths per minute, but it dips every time he twitches. Naomi approached the incubator slowly, her presence calm, but focused. The baby inside looked like a porcelain doll, fragile, unmoving except for the faint rise and fall of his chest beneath the warming blanket. Wires trailed from his tiny arms, and the ventilator pulsed in mechanical rhythm beside him. He's so quiet, Naomi said. His entire body fits in one palm, Jamie replied. His skin's thinner than paper. Naomi nodded. Every hour we keep him stable is another battle won. Parents are asking for updates. I'll talk to Emily. Across the hospital, Emily Carter was lying in her recovery bed, eyes red from exhaustion, body trembling with the aftershocks of trauma. But she refused to sleep. Her gaze was fixed on the window, though the blinds were closed. When Naomi entered, Emily turned, trying to sit up. He's still alive? She asked immediately.
Naomi stepped closer.
Yes. But we're not out of danger.
Emily let out a shuddering breath.
What does that mean? Naomi pulled up a chair beside her. Micah is extremely premature. At 24 weeks, every organ is still developing. His lungs are weak. His immune system is underdeveloped. Any drop in temperature, any infection, any lapse in oxygen flow could kill him, Emily finished. Naomi looked into her eyes. Yes.
Emily leaned back against the pillow.
They told me this would happen. All the risks. But I didn't care. I needed to believe I wasn't broken. You're not, Naomi said. Micah is here because of you. A long silence followed. Then Emily whispered, Can I see him? We'll take you in a wheelchair. Not yet, but soon. For now, rest. You'll need your strength. As Naomi left the room, she passed Dr. David Miller in the hallway. He was holding a tablet, scanning updates from the NICU. Blood oxygen levels just dipped, he said. Ventilator adjusted to compensate. Naomi stopped. He'll stabilize. David looked at her. You're staking your entire career on this child. No, she said. I'm staking my career on the belief that life doesn't need permission to fight. David didn't respond. Back in room 7, hours passed like minutes. Then minutes stretched into eternities. At 3:14 a.m., the alarm sounded. Jamie rushed to the incubator. The ventilator lights blinked in rapid succession. Oxygen saturation dropped to 68%. Heart rate slowing. He's crashing.
Jamie called out.
Naomi, still in her scrubs, ran into the room within seconds. Her hands moved instinctively. Bag him manually. Increase pressure. Jamie, get the epinephrine ready. A resident nurse stammered, He's so small I don't know if it'll. Then learn now, Naomi snapped. Micah's chest barely moved. The room pulsed with urgency. Naomi leaned over the incubator, her eyes locked on his face. You came this far, she whispered.
Don't stop now.
Emily, down the hall, heard the faint echo of the alarm. She sat up suddenly. Her instincts told her what her ears could not.
She pressed the call button.
I want to go to him. Now. 2 nurses arrived within minutes and wheeled her, for pole and all, toward the NICU. When they reached the viewing window, she could see it all. Naomi working feverishly. Jamie at the monitors.
The incubator lit under sterile light. Micah, still, too still.
No, Emily whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. Micah. Inside, Naomi tilted her head, hearing the faint sound of her voice. Micah's chest convulsed once. Then again. Beep. A single weak pulse appeared on the monitor. Jamie gasped. He's responding.
Another beep.
Then another.
The ventilator cocked up.
Micah was breathing again.
The room let out a collective breath. Naomi exhaled, her hands trembling.
David entered moments later. He came back, he asked. Jamie pointed at the monitor. Stabilized. Barely.
Naomi leaned over the incubator, whispering, You are the most stubborn little soulive verme.
Later that morning, the hospital buzzed with rumors.
Whisper of a baby born through a wound.
A fetus that had no chance. A mother who had risked everything. Emily was finally wheeled into room 7. The first time she saw Micah through the glass, her breath caught. She reached through the incubator's portholes, her fingers trembling. Micah's hand, barely the size of her fingernail, twitched. Then slowly, weakly, his fingers curled around hers. A connection was made.
Emily burst into quiet tears.
I thought I'd never feel this, she whispered.
À Holding Mine.
Naomi stood beside her. He's not out of danger. But he's here. He's mine, Emily said. And that makes everything worth it. David entered quietly. He watched the scene in silence, then said, I requested a meeting with the hospital board. Naomi turned. Of course you did. David didn't raise his voice. They'll want a full account.
The rupture, the extraction, the intervention without clearance.
Naomi nodded.
Lo right it all.
David hesitated. You could be suspended. Naomi looked back at Micah. Then I'll consider it time well spent. He didn't argue. Not this time.
As the sun rose over Portland, soft gold filtering through the NICU windows, the machine beeped in steady rhythm.
A rhythm born not from protocol, but from persistence. Micah had defied the odds again. And everyone in that room knew, they weren't just fighting for his life. They were witnessing it. 3 days after Micah Carter was born, St. Mercy Medical Center stopped being just a hospital. It became a headline. Someone from the NICU had leaked a photo, a grainy image of a gloved hand holding a baby no larger than a palm, his skin pink and nearly translucent, eyes closed, wires running across his tiny body. The photo made its way from a private group chat to a Facebook post. From there, it exploded. By morning, the hospital's switchboard was overwhelmed with media inquiries. Hashtags began trending across platforms. Hashtag Micah Miracle, hashtag Born from the Tear, hashtag Smallest Survivor. Naomi Singh woke to find her inbox flooded. Interviews requested. Medical journals demanding statements. Online forums debating ethics, medicine, and miracles. Everyone wanted to know more. But inside the NICU, nothing had changed. Micah still lay inside the incubator, his breathing assisted, his heart monitored. Emily Carter still sat at his side, barely sleeping, speaking softly through the plastic walls as if her voice alone could will him forward. You're famous now, she said one morning, her fingers resting lightly inside the incubator. But I still only care if you make it to tomorrow. Naomi stood nearby, watching both mother and child. She hadn't spoken to the media. Not yet. Not while Micah's condition was still uncertain. But she knew what was coming.
The question. The jugement. The investigation.
She had already been summoned by the hospital's medical review board. David Miller found her in the hallway outside the NICU, holding the summons in one hand, a tablet in the other. They're pushing the meeting up, he said. I figured, Naomi replied. They've reviewed the surgical report. They want to know why you deviated from standard C-section protocol. Why you risked maternal mortality to pursue a non-viable extraction. Why you acted without clearance. Naomi looked at him. And what do you want to know? David hesitated.
You want to know if you did do it again.
She didn't blink.
In a heartbeat.
His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Not anymore. Across town, cable news anchors spoke with carefully chosen words. The miracle birth in Portland is raising questions across the medical community. How far should a doctor go to save a premature infant?
And what upon when protocol and instinct collide?
Ethicists debated on panel shows. Religious leaders called it a divine sign. Legal analysts questioned liability. Medical experts remained divided. One doctor from Boston General stated on national television, what Dr. Singh did was not medicine. It was desperation. Another from Johns Hopkins disagreed. She read the moment.
That is what great doctor do.
Science begins with observation, but it grows through courage. Emily Carter was approached for interviews but declined all of them. I'm not a story, she told the hospital's PR team. I'm a mother. My baby is not a miracle. He's my son. But in the NICU, miracles and reality lived side by side. One morning, just before dawn, Micah opened his eyes for the first time. They didn't focus, he was still too early for that, but they blinked against the filtered light. Emily wept. Naomi stood behind her, hands in her pockets, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. You said he might never open his eyes, Emily whispered. I said he might not, Naomi replied. But Micah doesn't listen to might. Later that day, Jamie entered the staff lounge with her phone in hand. You need to see this, she said. Naomi looked over. On the screen, a new video was trending, a mother from Michigan, holding her own preemie, thanking Dr. Singh by name. Below it, comments poured in, thousands of them. She gave us hope again. Finally, a doctor who fights for life. But also, this was reckless. What if it had gone wrong? The public was split, worshipping and condemning her in equal measure.
Jamie put the phone down.
They're turning this into a war.
Naomi sat in silence.
It already was won. The board hearing was scheduled for Friday morning.
Naomi walked into the room alone, no lawyer, no press.
Just a file folder under her arm, and the memory of a baby's first breath carved into her bones. The board members asked their questions, one after another. Why didn't you follow standard extraction protocol? Why didn't you wait for the attending to approve surgical deviation? Why did you risk uterine rupture to attempt extraction of a non-viable fetus? Naomi answered them all. Calm.
Précise.
Honest. When it was over, the chairwoman closed the folder. We will review and notify you of our decision. Naomi nodded once and left. Outside, rain had started again, soft and steady. She walked back through the hospital corridors slowly, unsure whether she would return as a doctor or simply as someone who once was. But when she reached the NICU, Emily was waiting. I heard, she said. I know they're coming after you. Naomi didn't answer. I don't care what they say, Emily continued.
You gave Mai son a chance.
No one else would have. That matters. Naomi looked at her. I didn't do it alone.
You did it first. Inside the incubator, Mika stirred.
His fingers twitched. His lips parted slightly around the ventilator tube. Jamie entered a moment later. He's improving, she said. Lungs are developing. Oxygen levels steady for 6 hours. He might be able to cry soon. Emily smiled. I've waited so long to hear that sound. That night, Naomi returned to her apartment. She ignored the voicemails, the emails, the headlines. She sat alone in the dark, replaying the surgery in her mind.
The incision. The silence. The impossible terre. The heartbeat.
The breath. And one voice.
Tiny, almost imagined.
But real. She opened her laptop and typed a single sentence into a blank document. Sometimes life finds a way not through what we open, but through what we never saw coming. Then she closed the laptop and waited. For the next fight. For the next morning. For the world to decide what kind of story this would become. 2 weeks had passed since the day Micah Carter entered the world through a wound no one could explain. The headlines had started to fade. The outside world was moving on to newer, louder stories. But inside room 7 of the NICU at St. Mercy Medical Center, time still bent around the quiet miracle of a life that refused to disappear. Micah was stronger now. His breathing had stabilized. His heart no longer needed artificial pacing. The ventilator had been removed that morning, and for the first time, Emily heard what she had waited so long for, a sound. A cry. It was high-pitched, thin, barely louder than a whisper. But it filled the room like thunder. Emily stood at the incubator, hand covering her mouth, tears falling freely. Naomi and Jamie stood behind her, both silent, both watching with something close to awe. He cried, Emily whispered. He finally cried. Jamie nodded, blinking quickly. I think he finally believes he's really here. Naomi stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the infant whose survival had rewritten the rules. We can start prepping for his transition out of the incubator, she said. He's gaining weight. Regulating his own body temperature. If this keeps up, he could be discharged within 2 weeks. Emily turned slowly. 2 weeks. Naomi smiled. It's not guaranteed. But it's possible.
Emily looked through tears.
I didn't even think we'd make it to 2 hours. Later that evening, Naomi sat in the empty break room, staring at the ceiling. Her suspension was still under review, but she hadn't been removed from the NICU. Not yet. The board hadn't issued a final verdict. She didn't know if they would punish her, or praise her, or bury her in quiet shame. But she didn't care. She had already won the only verdict that mattered. Across the hospital, David Miller approached her. They're going to announce their decision tomorrow, he said without preamble. I figured. David looked at her, hands in his coat pockets. I filed a statement in your defense.
Naomi blinked.
You did. He nodded. I said you made a decision based on immediate need. That you acted outside of protocol but within the ethical bounds of urgent care. She studied him. That's not the David Miller I met in the OR. No, he agreed. It's the one who watched a baby breathe because someone else didn't give up. They sat in silence for a moment. You know, he added, this case will be in every medical ethics class for the next decade. Let them study it, Naomi said.
Mika earned it.
The next morning, Naomi arrived at the NICU early. She had a sense that today would be different. The air felt clearer. The sun had broken through the Oregon clouds for the first time in days. Emily was already there, sitting beside Micah's crib, holding a small book in her lap. He slept all night, she said. Didn't even need to be repositioned. Naomi checked the charts, her smile growing. He's a stubborn little miracle. Emily looked up. He didn't come through the way anyone expected.
Not the way the textbook say.
He didn't follow the rules. No, Naomi said. He tore his own path. They were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Jamie. You've got a visitor, she said to Naomi. Naomi frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. Jamie handed her a small envelope instead. It's from the board. Naomi held the envelope in her hand for a long second. Then she opened it. She read it silently. Emily waited. Well? She asked.
Naomi folded the letter slowly.
They've closed the investigation. And no action will be taken. I'm cleared to resume full duties. Emily's smile was immediate. Good. You're not done yet. Naomi exhaled deeply, the weight of weeks finally beginning to lift. She turned back to Micah, still asleep beneath the soft light. 2 days later, Micah was moved out of the incubator. 3 days after that, he latched during his first feeding. The nurses applauded softly, tears in their eyes. And then, exactly 4 weeks after the night he was born, Micah Carter was ready to go home. The hospital lobby was packed with staff, nurses, even a few reporters standing at a respectful distance. No cameras were allowed inside, per Emily's request. She walked out holding her son against her chest, swaddled in a soft blue blanket. Naomi stood by the sliding doors, her white coat folded over her arm. He's heavier than I thought he'd be, Emily said. That's what happens when you start believing you belong here, Naomi replied. Emily adjusted the blanket gently and looked at Naomi with something deep and quiet in her expression. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, Naomi said. You believed in him when no one else did. As Emily turned to leave, Jamie rushed over. Wait, she said.
One last thing.
She handed Emily a folded piece of paper, small, worn at the edges.
What is this?
Emily asked.
Jamie shrugged.
Something Naomi wrote.
She left it on the desk the night Mika coded.
I thought you should have it. Emily opened the note. Inside, in Naomi's handwriting, were just a few lines. You weren't born through a textbook.
You were born through a terre.
And sometimes that's where the light gets in. Emily clutched the note to her chest.
Outside, the sun poured through the clouds.
Micah stirred in her arms, one tiny fist lifting free from the blanket, reaching toward the sky as if he could feel the warmth waiting for him. Naomi watched them go, heart full, voice quiet.
You were never just born strange, little one, she whispered. You were born strong.
And behind her, the hospital hummed back to life. A place where rules had been bent, hope had been tested, and something beyond science had been born, through a tear, into a world that almost didn't believe he could exist. But he did. And that changed everything.